Welcome to Le Podcast de Philippe. Today, we're diving deep into something pretty fascinating and maybe a little unsettling.
Oh,
It's all about what happens when AI models start training on data that's generated by other AI models.
I see.
And to help us make sense of all of this, we have Sophie with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. It really does feel a bit like opening Pandora's box, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of does. But before we get into all of that, just a quick reminder to everyone listening to, please subscribe to Le Podcast de Philippe on YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon.
Right, and don't forget to like the podcast, too.
Absolutely. Those likes really do help more folks find the show.
For sure.
And on a personal note, I'm running a crowdfunding campaign right now for a photography exhibition, and any support you could give would be amazing.
That's fantastic.
All the details are on my website. You can find the link in the show notes. But now back to this whole AI conundrum. I mean, think about it. We are absolutely surrounded by AI-generated content these days.
We really are.
Text from ChatGPT, images from those tools like Stable Diffusion. It's getting tougher and tougher to tell what's made by humans and what's not.
Absolutely. And that's where things start to get, well, interesting. What happens when AI models are trained on this synthetic data instead of, the real thing?
Right. So we're talking about AI essentially learning from other AI.
Exactly. And that takes us into the territory of what researchers are calling model collapse, or sometimes model autophagy disorder.
Model autophagy disorder.
Yeah, maybe for short. Think of it like a photocopier.
Okay.
If you just keep making copies of copies, the image quality, it gets worse each time, right? Details get lost, everything gets blurry.
Makes sense. So that's what's happening to these AI models too.
That's exactly it. They start to, lose their grasp on what's real. There is a study in Nature that found that after only 9 rounds of training on AI-generated text, language models started producing basically gibberish.
Wait, 9 rounds? That's incredibly fast.
It is, and researchers at Rice University, they compared it to mad cow disease.
Mad cow disease.
In a way, the AI consumes itself, which leads to this deterioration.
Wow, this whole AI eating itself scenario is pretty wild. I mean, we're not just talking about things getting a little fuzzy around the edges here, right?
Yeah.
What are the real implications of this?
The implications are potentially quite serious, especially as we start to rely more and more on AI for, everything. From creating content to making really important decisions.
Oh, yeah, I can see you.
So one major risk is this thing called the amplification of errors.
Amplification of errors.
Basically, if the synthetic data has errors in it, those errors get amplified when the AI learns from it.
Like a snowball effect, but for bad information.
Precisely. So instead of learning and improving, the AI just keeps repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
And it's not just about errors either, right?
No, there's also this risk of losing diversity. If AI models are mostly trained on AI-generated content, they might start producing a much smaller range of outputs, and that could really stifle creativity and innovation.
I can see that. Imagine a world where all the music, art, and literature is just an AI echo chamber, constantly spitting out the same old ideas.
Exactly. Where's the human element, the spark of originality?
Yeah, that's a big question, and one we should probably start thinking about, before it's too late.
It makes you think about some pretty serious consequences, right?
Yeah, like AI spinning further and further away from reality.
Exactly. If AI mainly learns from synthetic data, it's kind of like building a castle on sand.
What do you mean?
Well, the AI could develop its own internal logic and biases that have nothing to do with the real world.
Yikes, that's a scary thought, especially as we see AI becoming more and more intertwined with how our world works, right?
Yeah, making decisions about healthcare, finance, even transportation. We need those decisions to be grounded in reality.
Absolutely, not in some AI-generated fantasy land.
Right. And one of the articles we looked at for this deep dive, Rick Song, he's the CEO of a digital ID verification company. He suggested using AI content watermarking to deal with this risk.
AI content watermarking. What is that?
It's basically embedding a digital signature into AI-generated content.
Like a little hidden marker that says, made by AI.
That's the idea. So it's a way to try to prevent AI-generated content from polluting training data sets for other AI models.
So keeping things separate. Human created over here, AI created over there.
Exactly. That separation is important. But Song also pointed out we can't just abandon human creativity and originality in our pursuit of better and better AI, right?
It's almost ironic, isn't it? We build these tools to enhance what we can do, but we could end up stifling the creativity that makes us human.
It is. Finding that balance is going to be key.
So how do we find that balance?
Well, one way is to focus on developing AI technologies that are more resilient.
Okay, so more resilient. What does that look like?
Think about AI systems that can detect, those negative impacts of training on synthetic data. Like maybe algorithms that filter out bad data or identify discrepancies between what the AI produces and what's actually happening in the real world.
So it's like we're not just trying to stop AI from eating itself. We're also trying to teach it to be a more careful eater.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. And there are a lot of smart people working on this right now, so that's a good sign.
It is. It is. But this goes beyond the tech itself, doesn't it?
Right. It's also about how we use it.
Yeah.
These conversations about AI ethics and how we're going to govern this technology, we need to have those now.
Before it's too late.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and let the tech decide our future, right? We need to be thinking about this, maybe even being a little skeptical of all this AI-generated content we're seeing.
For sure. So we've talked a lot about the risks of, well, AI models training on their own output. But what if we looked at this a different way?
What do you mean?
Like, are there any situations where this could actually be a good thing?
Hmm.
Yeah, are there any upsides to this whole thing? Where an AI is, training on its own output. Are there any scenarios where that could actually be beneficial?
There might be. It's definitely something worth exploring. One area where this could be really valuable is in developing those really specialized AI systems.
Specialized, how so?
Like, imagine an AI that's designed to, let's say, analyze a very specific type of medical image,
I see.
or maybe compose music in a particular genre. Instead of training it on this massive data set of, like, everything, you give it a really focused set of information.
So it's like a carefully curated diet for the AI.
Yeah, exactly. And by training it on a data set of its own outputs, you could potentially make the learning process much faster and also improve its accuracy.
So you're basically honing the AI skills, turning it into an expert in one specific area. That makes sense. Are there any other potential benefits we could see?
Oh, there could be. Think about like creative expression.
Right.
Let's say you have an AI that's trained on a data set of its own musical compositions.
Mm,
It might come up with melodies or harmonies that a human composer would never even think of,
really?
pushing those boundaries of what we think of as music.
Wow, that's pretty wild. But wouldn't that raise some questions about authorship? Like who owns the copyright to a song composed by an AI that's been trained on its own output?
Those are big questions.
They are.
Legal and philosophical questions that we're, just beginning to really understand.
It seems like every step we take with AI opens up all these new challenges.
It does, but I think that's part of what makes this field so fascinating. It's always evolving, always making us think in new ways.
So how do we navigate all of this?
Well, as we move forward, it's important to remember those ideas of transparency and accountability. We need to understand these systems, the data they're trained on, any potential biases they might have.
You can't just blindly trust what they produce.
No, definitely not. And I think that's a really important message for our listeners to take away. Be curious, stay skeptical, and keep learning about all of this.
Because the future of AI is being shaped right now. And we all have a part to play in making sure it's a future we want to be a part of.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of AI-generated data. Sophie, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been a really insightful conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to Le Podcast with Philippe on YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon. Hit that like button, tell your friends about the show, and as always, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning. Until next time, au revoir.